Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for coming to visit me on another podcast of The New Nation with your host, me. I'm Mike. This is me speaking. And before we get into the episode, obviously, I have to mention our great partner in Aura. We've still got an awesome giveaway going on, and Aura is a sponsor of that. So here's a message.
Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, even your relatives. It's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's podcast. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, my bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one or two of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping me safe so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours, my valued listener. You can go to aura.com/new to start your 2-week free trial, also linked below in the description. Remember, guys, it's a 2-week free trial, so allow Aura to be the security that gives you the peace of mind and the comfort that someone out there is looking out for you. aura.com/new.
Wasn't that a great little read that I did? I think it was great. I'd also like to take this time now to introduce the guest of today's episode. I have with me one of my favorite people on social media who happens to be a woman, and I know that's rare, but we're going to talk about abortion, and we're also going to talk about dating as a Catholic in today's world of social media and Gen Z dating. I'm going to try to use as little Gen Z slang as I can, but please welcome to the show. This is Anna Lulus, right? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you said that great. Normally people don't get it on the first try, so that's impressive.
Do they always think
it's Lewis? Yeah. Well, I'll respond. So I'm not like one of those people who are like, you must get my name right the first time. I know a lot of people are like that, but I'll respond to anything. But most people say Lewis. So that was good that you got it on the first try.
Well, because I put in your email, right? And then to send you the link for the room. But then it didn't go through. I got an error message. So I said, okay, did I spell her name wrong? I left off an A, but then I looked at the last name just to make sure. And I said, oh, it's Lulus. Very, very interesting. Is it French?
No, it's Polish.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay.
A lot of people think
Polish Catholics.
Oh, yeah. We're the best ones out there. I might be biased a little bit, but we're pretty hardcore, which is great. It's just like in our blood or something. But yeah, no, most people think it's Hispanic or something. I'm sure why. I think it's like Lewis or like the way it's spelled. Some people think it's it just derives from, I don't know, Latin American country, but yeah, no, Polish. So what about you?
I am a mix. I'm a mutt. My mother's from El Salvador, and my father, his family is Russian and Georgian, maybe a little bit of Polish in there. But my father's side of the family, they were Eastern European Jews, and my mother's family were Catholic as far as they can go back. I think until the Spanish arrived in Central America, they were probably indigenous. I think they were probably Aztecs, right? Not Mayans. Mayans were Mexico, or were Mayans Central America? Who knows? Whatever they were, they got converted, and thankfully they did. And I had E. Michael Jones last week tell me that I am not Jewish, even though my father's Jewish. He says, no, it's from your mother. You're a Catholic. And I said, oh, great. But there's going to be one person who's going to like this episode, and you being a Polish Catholic, not from Poland, but I have a follower of the New Nation who's a very strong opinion Polish girl. Like, she's really, really based, and she talks about dating all the time. Like, I can never find any good guys over here. They're all kind of weak. And I said, well, you got to expand your net a little bit more over there, I guess. But guys are intimidated. That's part of the problem. Is a lot of guys are intimidated to talk to girls. We'll get into that later. I don't want to get too muddy down right away. But I wanted to talk a little bit about your abortion activism, because that's how I found out about you. You're a pretty staunch anti-abortionist, right?
I am. Yeah, through and through. I've been always pro-life my entire life, but I wasn't always Catholic. Or technically, theologically speaking, I was just a fallen Catholic. So cultural Catholic, felt very secular, though. I identified as being agnostic, not knowing I was just a fallen Catholic at that time. But always pro-life, which like is the most fascinating part to most people I talk to, but mainly due to the scientific proofs for it. So I was always anti-abortion. And then when I got into my faith, that's when I had the why I should care. So I understood like scientifically when human life began, I just didn't have like, oh, well, I don't like, there's no reason for me to technically care or value human life. That's like I wasn't being logically consistent. And I tried to recognize that my worldview at that point was logically inconsistent. And so I didn't want to say like human beings had worth or value, or I knew instinctively they did, but I wasn't able to give you like a substantive argument for why until I got into my faith. And then when I had this crazy conversion and dove into my faith, that's when I really became super, super outspoken about the abortion issue.
How are you on capital punishment? Do you stay consistent?
Oh, that's such a tricky field or question right now. I think it depends. So the legal system right now, that's what we do with every single case, right? So if there's theft, you have to just analyze each case to see how do we contextualize this? What actually went down? Not every case is going to be the same. Sometimes you have people who are coerced into abortions, and then sometimes you have people who just want to kill kids, and they are totally okay with that. So I think you can't just have one answer for that. You really have to treat it like every other case in the legal field and analyze everything on an individual basis.
I came across it recently after, I think, rereading the Catechism, and the wording, and I've spoken about this before, but the wording, I forget how it goes, but it's just saying that I think the state can reasonably enact capital punishment on people that it cannot rehabilitate or that it cannot keep the public safe from. And I think that's after exhausting all possible measures. So first, I used to be the fact that like, oh yeah, we're going to kill people who murder other people or who rape other people or who kill kids and stuff like that. And then after getting into the anti-abortion side of things that are saying that, people are created with this innate value, right? And nobody is worthy of being killed or not existing anymore. And a lot of people would disagree with that. So then I said, well, if I'm going to be morally consistent, I would have to apply that to all humans and not just those in the womb, right? But then it gets tricky because there are very, very evil people who willingly commit evil acts. And I think the Catechism had an interesting point of view about it. That's interesting. So Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos will be treated as, I don't know what the wording was, treated as children or human life, or what? How does that feel? That's a win for us, right?
Oh, 100%. I don't understand why there's a debate on this issue, because I'm right outside Washington, D.C. right now, and you have a lot of people who say they're conservative, like freaking out about the whole IVF stuff. You have some, oh my gosh, yeah, Nancy Mace,
Donald Trump,
who are like, we're going to have to do something to make sure IVF is protected. And that just goes back to, well, when does human life begin? These embryos are human beings. Human life starts at fertilization. That's a scientific fact. So if human life begins at that point, human rights begin, and everybody has equal rights under the law. So everyone should be protected and treated the same, especially from just being frozen in time, essentially, or discarded if they're not used. So yeah, I think IVF is really horrific if you get into like what it actually does. I don't think a lot of people are educated about it. I think people experience infertility, and infertility is rapidly rising in this country due to various other things that we could probably talk about and get into. But the practice of IVF is really horrific. But I do think there's a lot of ignorance surrounding the practice of it and like what actually happens to the embryos. I know there are a lot of stories of people finding out later and recognizing like, oh, I have extra embryos left over. I have kids who are just kind of sitting there. I feel guilty about it. And there's this whole Snowflake system, Snowflake adoption, where you can put them up for adoption in hopes that somebody will use them. But then there's also that possibility of that not happening. So we would say that is
frozen embryo.
You can. Yeah. So that was the pro-life, I would say, solution or kind of solution to this issue. We were trying to figure out what to do with these embryos. We're like, well, let's put it up for adoption. If people are actually struggling with infertility and they're already created at this point, there should be an adoption process. So that is kind of the fix that we had prior to this Alabama case. Now that there's this Alabama case, I think that should be nationwide. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but they shouldn't, because human life begins at fertilization. Therefore, human rights begin at that point, and every human should be protected from that state on. So yeah, I would say snowflake adoption is still something I would encourage. I think it's a beautiful thing. But most people are just so uneducated about what IVF really does and how it's not really a solution to infertility. Like you're is the commodification of kids essentially at that point. So you're treating kids like products, whether you want to admit it or not. And I know that's a really hard subject with people who have struggled with infertility. It's heartbreaking. It's really, really hard. But I think God has another plan for you, and you can adopt. There are over 2 million families on the adoption list right now, and about 1 million people are aborted each year. So just imagine if you're able to adopt someone into your family, and what a beautiful thing adoption is, and kind of figuring out motherhood and fatherhood through that route, even if you're struggling with infertility, which is such an unfortunate and hard thing. So I know having kids make your life a billion times better. Like with our Catholic faith, we recognize that. So I would encourage that, but IVF is just not the solution. It's not the route. Just like abortion isn't the solution to anything, IVF isn't the solution to anything. We can't treat kids like products, but I do think this is the result of abortion culture. And abortion culture has essentially taught us that we can dispose of children. Like they are products to us, and we're only essentially allowed, or in our American mindset, we would say, like, if it's convenient for us at this point in time, then we'll allow the kid into our life. But if not, we'll kind of dispose of it like literal products. And so I think the idea of IVF is very popular here, which is why you see conservatives supporting it very broadly right now, which is horrible. But I do appreciate what happened in Alabama. I think it was about time for somebody to speak up for the embryos in that state and recognize their humanity, which hasn't really been done in quite some time.
So snowflake adoptions, is that something that the true, because I don't really like using pro-life, but is that something that the anti-abortion crowd would get behind, or not necessarily get behind, but if they had to advocate for something, they would advocate for that?
Yeah. Right now, me personally,
because it's happening like that.
Yes. So it's like, because this is happening and IVF is incredibly popular right now, how are we able to kind of, or try to fix this solution? And the snowflake adoption came about. And I would say the majority of the anti-abortion movement gets behind it, because we've recognized scientifically that human life begins at fertilization. And if that's the case, that means all of the embryos created are unique and distinct human beings that are worthy of life. And will have the chance to be born. That's correct. Yeah. Okay. Everybody deserves the chance to be born. I think it's ironic when people try to throw the whole, you're just pro-birth at me. And I'm like, hey, I am pro-birth. And I think that's a really good thing to be associated with, because everybody deserves to be born. Everybody has the right to life. So naturally, birth it contributes to that. But yeah, so the majority of the anti-abortion movement does support snowflake adoption and is against IVF, which is great to see. We just need to get the conservative movement now aboard that train, and hopefully everybody else will follow suit. Okay, interesting. That's something I never heard of before. The snowflake adoption. I just like the name of it. I wonder why they call it snowflake. Is because the embryos look like snowflakes? I mean, they're frozen. Oh, they're frozen. Oh, yes. Yeah. It's I've worked all day. It's okay. It's totally okay. I wouldn't put that together.
No, it's okay. Do you follow the Twitter Clump of Cells? Do you use Twitter at all?
Oh, yes. I use Twitter a lot.
It's a great anti-abortion feed.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of people I follow there are a lot of anti-abortion like influencers on there that I keep up with. I would say that's probably the only people I keep up with. So I'm shocked I don't think I'm familiar with that name though.
Follow Clump of Cells. So that people always post like, who would you save? Would you save one pregnant woman or would you save 6 frozen zygotes from a burning building? And then he always retorts back, who would you save? One pregnant woman or 6 90-year-old people on life support? So it's like, it's the same thing. They're all human beings.
Yeah.
These people make such wild assumptions about human life. It's insane. I used to follow this one woman. I think her handle was like abortion rights something. I don't remember what it was. But I followed her only so that I can respond to everything that she tweeted. And after a while, I was like, this is so tiring. I can't do it. I don't think these people are real. But they are, which is very, very weird. And I don't know how you put up with that all day, because it makes me mad dealing with pro-abortion people that I can't do that all day. I just can't. So how do you approach it? Do you approach it? I understand it. I know that you don't approach it from a place of anger. You probably approach it more from a place of love and concern for the unborn. Right. So I guess that's one way to, I don't want to use the word cope, but it's one way to keep your spirits high.
Yeah. I think it's okay to have righteous anger when it comes to this issue. So I try to balance that with understanding that it is a hard situation. Like, I know people who have been conceived in rape, and I've been outside sidewalk abortion facilities, and like guys coming up to me, guys basically dragging their girlfriends into abortion clinics and saying, like, if you talk to them, I had one guy say to me one time, if you talk to her, I will come back and shoot you. And I was in
no
DC,
way.
and I got the police, and it's crazy because sometimes when you're in the inner city, police don't help all the time, or like there's not almost that need to, because they see crime on a daily basis. So kind of a threat isn't as big of a deal for them. But yeah, the police were right there, and he came right up to me and said, if you talk to her, I'll come back and shoot you, which is insane. But it happened. And so I think I see stuff like that, and it does give me righteous anger for like the woman too. Like, I can't even imagine being in a relationship with somebody like that. He'll threaten a stranger. Imagine like being in a relationship with him and getting pregnant unexpectedly. I can't even imagine the rage or anger or things he would say to her if she didn't get the abortion. So I think you have to have both perspectives. I think because we live in a polarized society, people pick a side and almost dehumanize the other side to a certain extent. And I think there's an importance of the humanization of those individuals who have varying beliefs as you, because you don't know why they have that. They could have gone through something traumatic. They might not just be educated about abortion. I think a lot of people, the lack of education when it comes to the abortion issue is one of the reasons I think we're losing, also with like the rise in immorality within this country and the deconstruction of the family unit. There's a lot of factors that play into it, but I think we have to humanize the other side a bit. There is a wing, though, of the opposite side, the pro-abortion movement, if you want to call them that. And there are some radicals that recognize it's a human being but don't care. And they'll encourage somebody to get like 7 abortions, 8 abortions, and post about it online and celebrate it. So that is also rising within this country, the popularity and normalization of that. So I think you have to balance out righteous anger with compassion and love, and an understanding of why some people might be thinking a certain way or doing something that you may not be aware of, and trying to understand those people while also standing firm in the truth, and not compromising on human life and protecting and defending at any and all costs. So
easier said than done. I just want to hit people all the time. So 2 movies, I don't know if you've seen either of them, but 2 movies that kind of have to deal. One definitely does deal with pregnancy and motherhood. The other one is, it comes off as and I'll use pro-life, but it comes off as a bit of a pro-life message in the movie. Okay, 2 movies, you tell me if you've seen them. One is Waves,
No.
Okay. So Waves, I won't give it away. I'll try not to do, not trigger warnings, but spoiler alerts. So possible spoiler alert here. There's a movie, Waves, that was, I think, directed by the guy who created Euphoria. Either the guy who created Euphoria or the guy who directed Moonlight. I think it's the guy who created Euphoria. It may have been the same dude who also did Moonlight. Anyway, it's this movie about this family in South Florida, Black family in South Florida, in Miami, I think. And the movie follows in the beginning a high school age boy who has a very demanding, I wouldn't say overbearing, but demanding father who wants the best for his son, who wants to give him the family business once he finishes college, but who goes to all of his wrestling meets and is just very involved. And the son has a girlfriend, and the son and the girlfriend, they like to party. They're having a lot of premarital intercourse, and the girlfriend becomes pregnant. And they talk about, having an abortion. And I think at one point they drive, I can't remember, but I think they drive to a clinic, and she's like, I can't go in there right now. So they leave. Either that or he drops her off and she calls him like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I want to have this baby. They break up. And then the whole, I don't want to call it second act, but the second act starts from the breakup after not having the abortion. And this movie takes the most wild turn you'll ever, this movie, my jaw dropped when I saw what happened at the start of the second act. And I was just like, I did not expect this. It's a wild movie. So Waves is a really good movie. The second one is called The Pod Generation. Have you heard of this movie?
I have not, no.
Okay. I spoke about this movie recently on another episode. I played a little bit about the trailer. Spoiler alert. But go watch the trailer for The Pod Generation. It takes place in a not so distant, kind of dystopian future where technology has gotten so far advanced that now babies are able to be gestated, I guess. Women are able to be pregnant but not have to bear children for 9 months. So they are able to grow their own child in this pod. Think of like a big Tamagotchi or a gigantic plastic eggshell that the baby grows in. So women no longer have to be physically pregnant. They can choose to be, but the really cool ones, they have their pod babies, and this company will sell these pods. It will help you grow your baby. And basically it is targeted at women who want to work. They want to be boss ladies. They want to be, like it says in the beginning of the movie, where the main character is called into HR and says, you're getting a promotion. You're doing such good work. You're meeting all your metrics and targets and all that kind of stuff. Have you looked into the down payment you get as part of this bonus for having a pod baby? Because she's mentioned that she wants to have kids. And the husband, you have to remember, this is a world where technology is really, really advanced. A lot of AI, a lot of these things that they call nature pods and stuff, where you don't necessarily have to go out to the woods. They just have nature pods. And the husband is a botanist, and he's a fan of, I guess, the natural world. And he's like, no, we're not having this pod baby. Then he goes along with it. And then because the mother is so inundated with work, the father is the one who spends most of the time with this pod. It's a very weird movie. But spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, they want to have a natural birth. They don't want this baby to be born in some clinical setting that just pops out of a pod. They want it to be home with them. So the first person that the baby sees is the mother. It's this weird sort of satirical commentary on motherhood and pregnancy, where the feminism is just, they're making fun of it, but ironically, it's not unironic. They're not making fun of themselves because they think they deserve to be made fun of. I think they're making fun of themselves because they think it's funny, if that makes any sense. But
yeah, no, and it's crazy. I'm going to check it out. I don't watch movies or TV anymore, so that might be why I haven't heard of those. But it's shocking that that's becoming a reality nowadays. And people always talk about The Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's like through surrogacy, you're actually renting out another woman's body for your child. But this goes even a step further. and I would say is using technology to kind of replace women in motherhood and that natural and unique and exclusive experience that women have when it comes to pregnancy. So I will 100% check that out, because that is becoming a reality, crazy enough, here in the US.
It's on Hulu, and there's just this one scene that stuck out to me because, like I said, women can still become physically pregnant in this not so distant future world. And there's a part where it's Emilia Clarke, who's in Game of Thrones, and she goes to the gym and she has her little pod with her, because at some point during this quote unquote pregnancy, you're able to take the pod home with you. And she sees a woman at the gym who's actually pregnant, belly and everything. And the woman grabs her hand and says, "Oh, I can feel him kicking." And it's just this look on Emilia Clarke's face where she's like, that could have been me. I clearly missed this. This is clearly something I need to be experiencing, that I was built for and that I was meant to do. And I think she realizes through the movie that, you know, even though she wants this baby, that she kind of went about the wrong way doing it. Anyway, I could talk about movies all day, what I mostly talk about anyway. But let's talk about what I wanted to bring you on and talk about, because I don't know why. I probably could have talked to a bunch of different people about this, but I don't think you're over 30, right?
Yeah, I am 26.
Okay. So you are Gen Z.
I am. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I was just thinking about who can I have on to talk about this, and then I think I just saw like one of your stories pop up, and I was like, okay, cool, Anna, I'll talk to her. I'll see if she wants to come on, because I know that, you know, she'd wanted to come on before and wanted to have her on before. Let's talk about the dating. We have some questions, and we could start off with some questions just to get the discussion going. And I promised Anna I wasn't going to use any Gen Z nomenclature. So let's start out with Padrecito Pio asked a question, and he put it in quotes, so I'll say it. He says, "How does one riz?" And I wanted to ask you from the point of view of a woman. What are you looking for in a guy, especially a guy your age, a young Catholic guy, I assume? I mean, are you going to settle for just Christian, or do you want a Catholic guy?
Ideally, a Catholic guy. I think God has a weird way of working things out. Ideally, I am looking for that. But that being said, I have Catholic friends who started dating someone who were Protestant, and then they ended up converting to be Catholic. So I'm open-minded to that. I just don't prefer that. Right.
It's a little bit more work. Okay. So yeah. I don't even know what that means. I know Riz means game, I guess. So what was the question? What did Padrecito Pio ask? He says, "How does one riz?" I mean, I guess he's asking me that because... Like
charisma, maybe?
Yeah, but I still hold to the fact that, you know, guys should be approaching women. I don't necessarily think that women should be approaching men. So I don't know if he's asking you that. How does one riz? Or from your perspective, how can one guy, I guess, quote unquote, spit game? How can a guy chat you up? What's the best way that a guy can ask you out on a date? Does a guy need to know you a little bit before he asks you out on a date? What's the ideal situation for that situation?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say you have to be personable. Like, you have to be easy to talk to. If I feel awkward or uncomfortable talking to you, or feeling like I'm the one holding the conversation, I immediately just don't feel it. I think the riz comes in when I can tell somebody's kind of owning the room and can just talk to anyone and everyone. And it, like I said, it feels very easy to talk to them. I prefer to know them a little bit. I don't like just jumping into a relationship. Mind you, I've only dated one guy in my entire life. But that's also because I don't like jumping into things. I don't do the whole casual dating. I prefer to be friends with you first, and then, but not for a long time. Like, if there's chemistry there and I think you might be a potential, I would prefer him to make a move sooner rather than later. But I do want there to be some type of friendship before even dating, so I know if this is most likely going to work out, versus just going on dates with random people I don't really know. So I would say, and you have to be kind. You have to be funny but kind, and very hold my values, because I'm a very blunt person. I'm pretty strong-willed, due to my Catholic faith and just personality in general. So if somebody's just not there with me on stuff, it just probably will not work out, because I want the guy I end up marrying to be a lot stronger than me, not just physically, but like intellectually and in terms of his personality, just being able to speak up more than me when it comes to certain issues. So being unapologetic about what they believe and very firm in that as well. Yeah, I would say that's the whole Riz for me.
Do you think a young man should seek out relationships with women outside of, let's say, like a work type of environment? Because you were saying like he has to be friends with me first. If I think obviously when you're saying that you don't casually date, even if I'm just approaching a woman, that was always the objective when I was younger, and I didn't do this in any sort of headspace of being a Catholic, because I wasn't. I'd kind of strayed away from that. So my intention of ever speaking to, chatting up, or hitting on a woman was to get her on a date, not necessarily even strike up some sort of friendship, because I've always held this rule of like, no, we're not meant to be friends with each other. We are meant to be with one another, have a family, get married, have a family, be fruitful, multiply. That's me now. But I don't know. What do you think? Is it appropriate to chat you up in church? I have one friend who we were talking about. I was going to have a guest on talk about dating. He said, my sister and I had to leave this one Catholic mass because after every mass, my sister kept on getting hit on and asked out on dates. It's like no small talk, no chit chat. It was like, hey, my name's so-and-so, want to go out for coffee? And I said, I guess I wonder, was the guy attractive? And he was like, no. Okay. I said, well, that's probably an issue, which is kind of annoying. I can imagine being hit on by not so attractive men is probably a downer for going to church. But obviously, guys, be groomed well, smell good, look good, like my mother always said. And like you said before, there's confidence. There's confidence in going up and speaking to a woman. If she can feel a little bit of sheepiness or pusillanimous sort of vibes from you, she's going to pick up on that. They're like dogs.
Yeah.
Not in a negative way, you're like dogs, but in a positive way where you guys can sniff that stuff out. But is it appropriate to drop some quote unquote Riz at church or after church?
I think so. So I also agree. I think it's when people, I didn't used to hold this view when I was younger, because I don't think I understood it fully or what dating fully meant. But I would say when I talk to a guy, majority of the time, I probably have an interest there. But I would say, yeah, church is the best spot. Like, I would rather meet somebody at church than randomly at a restaurant or like on the street. Or I know some people like using dating apps. I'm not a fan of dating apps, but I think that's when this person at least shares my values. And even if there might not be chemistry there, at least they share my values. There's probably, and if you are cute, for example, and I know you share my values, I'm probably going to be more likely to go on a date with you. So I would say, and it's a place they're going to go every Sunday. So it's not like you have to think about, oh, where's this girl going to be or guy going to be? They're going to, if they're a devout Catholic, they're going to mass every Sunday. They're probably going to go to the same, like either TLM or the Novus Ordo or like, yeah. So it's like, I think that's the perfect place to go. I know it might be a little annoying if, you're getting asked out maybe by guys that you're not necessarily interested in. That being said, I feel like that has happened to me at church. But I see that as, I try to be like as encouraging as possible, even if I don't think they're cute. I think it's, which I hate saying, I think it's a courageous move for men now, because men don't approach anymore. I think men need to and are designed to do that. So when they do go up and ask me out or say there's interest there, even if I reject them, I do it in a way where I like encourage them at the same time. Like, that was really cool. And I never really get annoyed by it. But I can see how maybe some people could feel that way. I personally don't, though. And I think other women are seeking that. Yeah. Like, they're wanting guys to actually approach them more. That's one of the biggest frustrations maybe among my friends who are single is like, I just feel like this guy's really cute and I think he might like me, but he doesn't approach me. He doesn't like do anything. And we might have like briefly chatted once, but it wasn't like he was taking initiative and like actually pursued a long conversation with me, or took initiative. So I think that's something that's desired within every woman. But I know how we've feminized our culture a lot and kind of have told men not to do that. So I do think it's become more of like a courageous thing for guys to just like go up to a woman and ask them out.
Yeah, totally. And listen, guys, you don't have to do that right off the bat. You don't need to ask, especially if your church has coffee and donuts or something like that after. You don't necessarily need to ask a girl out to coffee because it's right there. What I think is the best is to get to know someone a little bit, especially if you're physically attracted to this person and you want to find out more about them. You have the perfect in that sort of after church environment, but don't lead off with the, hey, want to go out? That person, like you said, is going to be there the week after that. Get to know that person a little bit more. Chat them up a little bit by bit. Maybe the first time, introduce yourself, and don't lie, but just be like, I've never seen you here before. My name is such and such, blah blah blah. These are my friends over there. You know what I mean? I don't know how to do it. I feel like a grandpa kind of talking about it. But the one thing that I've never had an issue with was approaching people, especially women. I've never had that sort of sheepishness or shyness. I would go right up to anyone my friends point out, hey, go talk to her over there. Easy, fine. What do I've got to lose? It's not a big deal. So I think once guys understand that, and listen, nobody wants to be embarrassed. No one ever wants to be turned down or rejected, but it's good to get practice in, I guess you can say. And like you said, a lot of guys aren't approaching women because a lot of guys aren't going out into the real world, because I think obviously addiction to their phones is one thing, but if it's the one place where you don't necessarily rely on your phone for anything, it's definitely church. So guys, little by little, okay? You don't need to go right into it. It's, right off the bat. Know her name first before you ask her out.
Amen. Yeah.
For coffee. Someone wanted to know, I guess you said you don't do the apps. It says thoughts on Hinge. Also, I got to put a stop to all the thought stuff. I know that the question bubble on Instagram doesn't give you too many characters, but stop with thoughts. Instead of saying thoughts on Hinge, say, hey, how do you feel about the app Hinge? That's all you have to say. How do you feel about this? Not the thoughts. So thoughts on Hinge. What is Hinge? Is it different than Tinder or Bumble or anything like that?
Yeah. So there's a few dating apps that are a big no-no. Like if you're actually into dating, you'd probably be on an app like Hinge versus Tinder, for example. So Tinder is more like short-term relationships. Hinge is more of like, I'm looking generally for long-term relationships, but it also does a good job with filtering people out. So from my understanding, you can put things like, say you want somebody who's Christian, you want somebody who doesn't drink a lot or smoke, who has conservative views, and Hinge can just sort through their algorithm people you might potentially be interested in. And you can put your location, like it's a 10, like it could be in the DC area or it could be in another state. You essentially, it leaves it up to you to kind of decide. It's weird because I used to be so against dating apps, but one of my best friends just got married to a guy she met on Hinge. So it's changed my view a little bit, but I still don't think people should prefer Hinge or prefer dating apps in general. I think we need to make more of a commitment to going out and meeting people within your community and getting involved in church more, or meeting people even through your friends or family members. It's just more organic that way. I don't think it's natural or organic for us to be meeting people online. Maybe if it's like you followed this person for a long time on their Instagram account and you can see their personality a little more and there's an interest there, that's a little different versus Hinge. It's kind of just like strangers who don't know you at all. Right. And besides the list of prompts that you write out, that being said, one of my best friends just got married to somebody who she met on Hinge. So it has worked out for some people, which is why I'm not like super, super against it. I think it works for some people. And then other people, I think we were all just made to meet people in person personally. But I know times are changing a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm a little biased because I met my wife via Tinder. So
no way.
Well, yeah. Well, we weren't even interested in like long-term relationships, which is another story. But now that, I don't think that we would go back and change anything, but I think there's a little bit of cringe looking back on that. We're like, okay, we should have, learned a little bit more about each other first.
Yeah. But it worked out.
Yeah, it did. It worked out great. And I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that, people want to meet each other organically. They kind of want those meet cutes, quote unquote, like their parents had or something like that, their grandparents. But, we are in that sort of digital age, but I understand breaking away from it. But like you said, people, I'm one of them who have found success through that. I also think that it could lead to, more of that sort of addiction to social media, and just kind of the whole swiping culture seems a bit of a net negative than it does a positive. It just seems like shopping, like kind of like window shopping. But
yeah,
you do get a chance to know a person more.
That's true. And their intention. Sometimes when you're out in public and you run into somebody, you don't know if they're single, if they're looking for, like, wanting to date somebody, if they have the same beliefs as you. So I think that's what's changed my mind about dating apps. I used to be really against it, like I said, but now I'm more open-minded because I know people who've met online, and they basically said it was like filtering out all the people. Like, right when you can match with somebody, you already know they're Catholic or Protestant. You already know they hold conservative or liberal beliefs. And then all these prompts, you can see if they have a sense of humor or whatnot. So I do think it's helped a little bit, and they're on there to date. So it's a little different.
Dating now, like at the end of high school, college, or I assume people are dating. I'm working with a girl right now who's 22. She just graduated college, but she had met her boyfriend when she was either a freshman or a sophomore in the dorms. I think he lived on another floor, and she was just walking by the room and saw that they were playing Guitar Hero, and she leaned in. She's like, I've never played Guitar Hero before. And that's how they met. And they're still dating now. Most likely you're going to get married. But I mean, I don't know. Are people still meeting like that? Because I was in high school. I graduated high school 22 years ago now that I think about it. Oh my God. And my first girlfriend ever was the friend of one of my friends in our friend group. And then my probably most serious relationship after that, it was the sister of a friend. And then I bartended, and I met girls through bartending. It was always this thing that, I met people who I had met in real life and either interacted with them or knew them through friends. But it wasn't until maybe 2014 that, like, I started doing like online dating stuff, like the Bumbles and the Tinders. And I saw that as just, it wasn't good. It wasn't good until I had met my wife, I think. And I think that just might have been meeting the right person. But that also might be a cope, because I probably didn't act as well as I should have before that. But luckily my wife ended that sort of behavior, which was good. But I don't know. I kind of wish people had more of a date to marry sort of mindset, because I'll tell you firsthand, it's a lot of wasted time. There's a lot of wasted time out there, a lot of wasted energy, and just a lot of wasted behavior, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
So I do encourage, I guess if you can sort of filter out the people you would like to meet that do share the same values, that does have some value. It could be a positive thing. So thoughts on Hinge? I don't know. What
in the middle.
50-50? Like in
50-50. I used to, if you were to ask me 2 years ago, I would say I'm anti-Hinge, but I'm in the middle now. I've moved.
Okay. I guess this is a question for me, how to properly vet a potential wife, right? Okay. So let's say I was vetting Anna, right, as a wife. Let's see. Attractive, very, very anti-abortion, pro-life. I don't want to say conservative, because I don't really like conservative. It's kind of like, I'd say right wing, if anything, but she's Catholic, so that's a given. Very knowledgeable, very smart. And this is the first time we've met. So how to properly vet a wife, offer, meeting somebody through a video conference call or whatever this is. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but you do have to look at those sort of characteristics in somebody. You obviously talk to that person, you find out, does she want to have children? How important is her faith to her? Does she want to work for the rest of her life, or does she want to run a household. I like to think about it, that the woman runs the household. You know what I mean? The father makes the home, and then the woman runs the household, or it can go either way. But does she understand the role of her sex, if that makes any sense? I think those are ways to vet women. If you were to sort of steel man your own sex, what could be some things that you could tell guys, okay, this is how you vet us, or, you know, these are the types of qualities you need to look for in a woman?
That's a good question. I would say everything you just said. I think it's very important to talk about roles, gender roles. Like, does a woman, are men men and woman, which sound crazy to even say. I know that's a hot take in today's society, but it's true. Like, men are designed to protect and provide, and women are the nurturers. We care, and we don't want to do that. I think a lot of women have been pushed into that role because of society and people telling us we need to be boss babes since we could probably walk. So I think we've made women super masculine and feel like we have to take on the masculine role. But every single woman, no matter where they fall politically, religiously, you name it, once they are under a guy who knows how to lead, we will naturally just allow it to happen. It's just instinctual. It was how we were designed. So I would say that is an important thing to ask about. And maybe she is resistant at first, so I wouldn't say maybe discard her, because I used to be pretty independently minded. Like, I wouldn't say I was feminist, but when I was agnostic for 19 years, I'm pretty strong-willed naturally, and so that led me to have more feminist traits or qualities and be super independent. I fell into the worldly secular mindset of you are whatever you produce and how successful you are. So, but when I came into my faith, I realized that's so incredibly false. But it's unfortunate that I grew up thinking that, because society has just told me my entire life, and I just naturally felt pushed into that. So I would say, even if there is a little resistance there, because it was with me for a little bit, like to maybe just like go on a few dates, see how like she really is. And if you are a strong man who can lead well, she just wants to see that, and she'll follow you. So I would say that is making sure she kind of understands that, but don't discount her if she's resistant at first. Her faith, I would say, is a big deal. Her family, like where
family's big. Family's bigger. Together, like things like that. Yeah, that says a lot about you. It really molds you into who you are, and not that you are your family, because I know people come from broken families and it doesn't represent them, but it's still important to know that, because it informs you about that person, like what they've been through, why they might be a certain type of way. So I would say that faith, and just values in general, and also traditional gender roles, to see their thoughts on that, and hopefully you guys align on that as well. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with, I mean, listen, single women, I don't necessarily have a problem with single women working, right? Because like, what else are they going to do? You know what I mean? They have they have no home to take care of for the most part. So when you're out with, let's say, a really successful woman who is single, I think that as a guy, you should really talk to her about, okay, are you willing to quit your job once, you get pregnant, or once you decide to have kids and we want to start this process? Like, how willing are you to end this? Because a lot of women now, I would assume, would be sort of hesitant to talk about that, or to really give up their job, just because they've been so inundated with the lies of men or women being men.
Yeah,
and you
literally
really have to tell them. It's just like the situation of saying to a woman who's in the corporate world, listen, if you get pregnant, your boss would rather you kill your child so that they don't have to pay for maternity leave. That's just what it is. I think every Fortune 500 company will pay for a woman to have an abortion. Yeah, I think they'll subsidize that.
Because they don't really care about you. They see you as something that will help them continue to get rich. So it's like you there's no value. The only value, your value is whatever you produce. You lose your humanity in that way. And I think men are designed. I know men are designed to work and provide. So men naturally almost gravitate towards environments like that, because it's I don't know, like maybe competition or it's just, they thrive in environments. Yeah. And where women, we hate it. Like, and I think sometimes people have to live through those experiences, unfortunately, to understand that this is not what I was designed for and what I'm actually happy with doing, because I'm not valued here. I'm valued at home, being a mother, raising my kids. And I know there have been many saints who have not been married and have done great things. So I think you really have to talk to God about like what your calling is and mission is. That being said, if you're called to be a mother, knowing that that's the first thing that comes before anything else, everything else has to take a back burner to that. And if you're not willing to understand that and acknowledge that, I would say that there's a big problem there. It's just unfortunate because society has told women to be so independent, to make your career your entire life. And all these women who are now 30 plus years old, who are single and childless, are freaking out and realizing I lived through that and I'm not happy. And I want that. I want to be a mom. I want to have that family and be at home, but they feel like so much time has passed. And those people can still, hopefully correct their path from that. But I do think it's such a toxic narrative that we've been fed for so long. I mean, I fell into it for quite some time. And even when I got into my faith, it was hard for me to resist that because you're almost brainwashed into thinking you are your career, you are whatever you produce. But that's so incredibly false. And somebody said this to me one time of people have to submit to things. Like we have to ultimately submit to authority, whether that's God's authority with everyone, specifically with men. And then with women, it's like God, but also when you're married, your husband. And if you're in the workplace, you're just submitting to another man. That's not your husband. That doesn't really care about you and your well-being. So naturally, when you do get pregnant, they're only thinking about money and how the company runs. So naturally, they're going to say, well, just get rid of that kid, get rid of it, like kill it essentially, so that you can keep making me rich. Like, I don't care about you, your well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being. This just ultimately benefits me and not you in the long run. So I think women are so blindsided and brainwashed that they're not able to, unfortunately, recognize that.
I think we got a little bit of an issue. I don't know if she was kicked. Let's pause this 1 second and then we'll come back to it. Oh, wait. Okay, she's back. Okay, you froze for a while.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. Essentially, though, single women make that money, save that money. So that way you have a little nest egg after you get married and you're able to, put something away for when the kid comes. Let's see here. Also, guys, you can wife kill your wives or your girlfriend. I did it. So, okay, this is a Gen Z term, and I hate it because whenever I'm scrolling on Instagram and I see these interview videos and someone says biggest ick, I want to punch the phone. Biggest ick when dating. Also, love you, Anna. That's from Sofers.
Oh, she's the friend who got married, that guy from Midge.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, she's like one of my best friends. That's so funny. Biggest ick.
I hate it. I don't even like. Why?
I would say just narcissism. I know. Yeah, I would say like narcissism. Like if you can tell you're really he's like too into himself, or like sometimes it's hard to spot narcissism, but like when I've encountered it or when I've seen other people in relationships like that, it's really toxic and it's not. Yeah. Men are supposed to lead, and if they lead but they have narcissistic tendencies, it can be very unhealthy for women to, and it's hard for them to follow because you don't trust them, right? So I would say that's the biggest ick. If I can point that out immediately, it's an absolute like no. Or just being like rude to people, like mean and just not, I don't know. I think you can tell right away like somebody's character and personality. So I'd say like if I can tell you're rude or like kind of narcissistic, I would say that's such an ick for me.
Okay, good. We're going to end that whole line of questioning there just because I hate that word. I can't stomach it. I don't like it. I don't know what it is about it. But yes, Gen Z, I feel for you. What do they call it? What's the rate of repopulation? Not the birth rate, but the what do they call that? Elon Musk talks about it all the time, that we're not going to be able to reproduce enough to sustain society. What is that called?
Yeah, we're underpopulated right now. Like we're not. Well, we have a population issue, and a lot of people want to talk about population control, but we actually have the opposite issue. So you're not like, I don't want to say restocking, but like reproducing enough to take over the workforce. So I think he tweeted out one time, make more babies, literally that will like save society. And I couldn't agree with him more. I think the way he goes about it is, I need to stop saying that. I know the way he goes about it is very distorted and not within God's design by any means, but I think he's getting the right idea of what needs to happen for a society in general to flourish and like to be repopulated.
Yeah, Musk isn't our guy. And I have this almost on a weekly basis with Trump where I go, Trump's not our guy. And then I was like, okay, he might be our guy. And then he's not our guy. So the whole thing with IVF, Trump's like, we got to protect IVF. He's not our guy. And it's like, oh, Trump proposes like an abortion ban nationwide. It's like, oh, he is our guy. And it's like, oh, that's up to 16 weeks. So, okay, all right, he's not our guy. And then all the stuff with Israel and all that stuff. But where was I going with this? I was going to say something about, this is what happens when I don't do a show middle of the day and I'm clear because I'm thinking about sleeping because I've been up for so long. But this is good. This is what happens, guys, if you don't keep your minds as exercised as your bodies. This is what can happen where you forget what you're going to talk about. But the whole not our guy thing, Anna, what was I saying?
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Repopulation or reproduce. He does things that are like weird.
Okay. Yeah. So the one our guy for Trump is he was talking about how he wants to do a tax credit for all homes that homeschool. I think like $10,000 a kid. So it's like, oh, Trump's our guy again. Okay, cool. He's saying like people are going to have like 8 kids now and be like, we're homeschooling. I'm going to say, that's awesome, I think. And I mean, there are some Nordic countries, I think it's Hungary, that's incentivizing people to have kids. Like, hey, we're going to give you $3,000 a year for every kid that you have. And it's kind of what we have with tax credits and stuff over here in the US, but there's no incentivization for families here now. And I wish that the government would get behind, families having more children for the right purposes and not necessarily to be sort of welfare stooges. That sounds mean, but I lived in New York for most of my life. I know what welfare stooges are. It's not necessarily a bad term. It's a bad thing, but it's something that happens. And what happens in those types of homes is that parents aren't there. These women just have kids. It's kind of weird because they're not having abortions. They're having more kids, but that's only to get more money from the government, and fathers aren't in those homes, and there's, the mother can't really look after them. So the community in the opposite way looks after these kids and doesn't provide support for them. So I don't want the homeschool thing to be taken advantage of. I want people to actually do it in the right way, but there's no way to control that, I guess.
Yeah, incentivize people getting married then. It'd be like, if you get married the right way, maybe then that can encourage more of a culture of life. I know this company, I don't know if you're familiar with it, called Every Life Co. It's like the only pro-life diaper company out there. And I think maybe Public Square does this. There's crossover with the leadership and those two companies. But what they do are baby bonuses. So if you work for them and you get pregnant, they will give you a bonus. And which I think is great. I think that's way better than what a lot of companies are doing, which is making abortion seem really popular and incentivizing that. So when I hear stuff like that, I think there's only a positive outcome there. Like you said, though, I think sometimes people, especially in impoverished communities, maybe, or inner city communities, could potentially take advantage of that in terms of just doing it for money, but it ultimately has a reverse side effect of like fathers not being present.
Yeah, the family doesn't have to be intact in order for the government to subsidize your pregnancies.
Right. So I think there needs to be something that ensures the man is involved and taking care of the family. no matter what. Because I know there are a lot of cases where just fathers leave and they never see their kids ever again. And fatherlessness families, I've studied broken families pretty rigorously. And fatherlessness is a factor for so many things. And people don't recognize that, but also proves the existence of God and like the structure of the family with the man being at the head, because you can have a really strong mom. And there are great mothers out there, single moms, unfortunately, due to whatever reason, that are great. But even then, if a father's not present, you still see these negative outcomes or the probability of a negative outcome being incredibly high still. And it's because fathers add so much more. Naturally, as children, we look up to our fathers, whether we subconsciously recognize that or not. And a lack or absence of that, there's a lack of absence of discipline, control, understanding, leadership, how to treat even females or provide appropriately, effectively. And so you just see all of these horrible outcomes because of that. So I think somehow, even if like, I don't know, say it was a teen pregnancy and the parents don't end up getting married, somehow encouraging or ensuring that the father stays involved in the family throughout the kid's life and continues to support mom, no matter what. And we just can't allow them to kind of dip and disappear. I don't know how we would do that, but if there's a way to do that, I think that would be the most effective thing. But I do think tax benefits is incredible. I would not say no to that. Right. So I think that's great.
Listen, Anna, we're going to end it there just because it's been an hour. It's been a fabulous hour. I could talk more, but I'm tired. And I'm going to go to bed. But thank you for taking the time. It's even later over where you are now because I'm an hour behind you. So I really do appreciate you coming on. Hope to have you on in the future. I want to do something where I can have multiple people on to talk about stuff, and I'd love to have you on again and talk. But thank you for coming on. I think I've said that now 3 times. Thank you for coming on. I'm delirious. Everybody, I'm delirious.
I'm the same way. I loved being on. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Stay in the room after I hit end, just to make sure that we get the audio captured. Bye, guys.
Sounds good.
And
because the Pope did that.
Right.
Okay, because if I jump ship, I'll end up having to have Taylor Marshall as my Pope. And I don't want that. I prefer the guy in Rome any day of the week over Taylor Marshall or Timothy Gordon or any of these self-appointed popes. Okay?
Right.
Because the main issue here is unity. And the main problem with the Latin Mass is disunity. It's disunity because there are people now, anytime you hear someone say Novus Ordo Catholic, you're talking to someone who's in schism or heading toward the door.
Even with approved Latin Masses and stuff like the, not the SSPX, but the
FSSP.
Right, right.
I'm not talking about the FSSP. I'm talking about people who use the term Novus Ordo as some indication that if you don't go to the Latin Mass, you're a second-class Catholic.
Right.
Sorry. Now, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go along with this type of bullying. Okay? You're not a first-class Catholic or somehow special because you go to the Latin Mass. If you think you are, you're heading out the door.
Right.
And it's our duty as fellow Catholics to keep these people in the church. Now, I've said this before, but there is a passage in the gospel where Jesus Christ is asleep in the boat, and the storm is getting worse, and the apostles are getting more and more nervous, and finally they wake him up and say, "Don't you care? We're all going to die." That boat is the church. And the storms are the troubles that the devil uses to assail the church. And the one thing you don't want to do is jump out of the boat during a storm, because that's instant death, because there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. And you being an ultra-Catholic in schism, doesn't matter how old your Latin Mass is, if you're outside of the church, you cannot be saved. This is St. Augustine. Don't argue with me. Read St. Augustine's treatise on the Donatists. They were the schismatics of his day. It was a Judaizing sect that didn't want contamination. I've listened to Bishop Williamson, a guy I like. I met with him. He says the church has tuberculosis. And if we associate with the people in the church, we will get tuberculosis. That is classic schismatic thinking. He's outside of the church because he thinks of them. Now he's outside of the SSPX. Bishop Fellay said the same thing. Church has cancer. This is bad medicine, in addition to being bad theology. If we associate with the church, we will be contaminated. This is Jewish thinking.
Mm-hmm.
The Donatists were a Judaizing schismatic sect at the time of St. Augustine. This is not Catholic. And I don't care how many Latin masses you go to, you're not going to make up in quantity what you lost in quality by engaging in sins against charity. Augustine said, if you lack charity, you cannot be saved. The prime example of lack of charity is refusal to associate with fellow members of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, to me, it's never mattered which mass anyone went to. I mean, obviously, it matters if you're going to like an SSPX mass, and if they're in schism, that's probably not the best idea. But
it's a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. But I don't want to say I left the church for 20 years, but growing up Catholic in Catholic schools, Catholic university, my whole life, there was a period of time which I do regret now in a way, but a friend of mine saying, you have nothing to regret it. You're back in the church. Don't regret that. But there was obviously this draw to tradition that I think a lot of, I'm not young, I'm almost 40, but there's a draw to tradition that I think a lot of younger men now are experiencing, where a lot of young Protestant men are now discerning Eastern Orthodox Christianity and then traditional Catholicism. Do you think that there's anything worthwhile in the sort of in the midst of this tradition that people are being drawn to? Like, can that be used for good?
Of course it can. Of course it can. But the problem is it could be used for evil as well. And I'll go back a couple decades, okay, when the big battle was Medjugorje. And I wrote a book against Medjugorje. And everybody hated me. I mean, I lost thousands of subscribers. But now I'm glad I did it. But anyway, at that point I said, is the rosary a good thing? Oh, yeah, it's a good thing. Can you follow the rosary out of the church? Well, yeah, you can. Well, then it's a bad thing. Mm. Is the Bible a good thing? Of course the Bible's a good thing. Well, what if you follow the Bible out of the church? Then the Bible doesn't change. It's always going to be a good thing. But you're turning it into a bad thing because you're leaving the church. That's known as Protestantism.
Right.
That's what they did. So there's nothing wrong with the Bible, but if you follow it out of the church, you're committing a sin. Well, now we're at the Latin Mass. Is the Latin Mass a good thing? Yes. Of course, the Mass is always a good thing. Right. If you follow it out of the church, that's a bad thing. And that's exactly what the SSPX has done. They follow this out of the church. And when Ratzinger tried to bring them back, I met with Bishop Williamson. He said, went to Wimbledon, all the way to England to meet with them. I said, it's time to end the schism. He said to me, he didn't deny they were in schism. He said, I have a letter on my desk. And he said, it says, I accept Vatican II in light of tradition. I said, we'll go up and sign it. And then we'll talk about tennis. Well, he couldn't sign it because he's in schism, because his mind has been darkened by this sin. And now, he's not even in the SSPX. It's had the same fragmenting effect that Protestantism has had.
Can you talk about, can you sum up for people who don't know the Medjugorje in like a minute or so? Because I was interested when you say, is the rosary a bad thing? Like, no, but can you use it to follow it out of the church? I just wanted to hear you talk about that just a little bit more.
Yeah, the best thing you can do, I'd be happy to, but a minute's too short. I have a book called The Medjugorje Deception. You can go to Culture Wars. You can go to culturewars.com. Or you can go to fidelitypress.org and you can buy a copy of that book, and you will understand the whole bad theology and why it's a bad thing and how it can hurt you if you buy that book. It's called The Medjugorje Deception. If you go to the same website, you can also buy The Holocaust Narrative, which is what you started off talking about.
Right.
So Medjugorje began as kids getting caught doing something in Bosnia. And then they lied about it, and then they got in trouble, and then the priest, 2 Franciscans stepped in and took it over and used it because the Franciscans were in a battle with the local bishop about who was going to control these parishes. Mm-hmm. And from there, it morphed into basically, it got adopted by the CIA.
What?
As part of the anti-communist crusade. I wrote a letter to the CIA, Freedom of Information Act, got 20 pages of documents about the CIA's involvement with Medjugorje. 19 3/4 of them were blacked out. And then they had the gall to send me a bill. So I wrote a letter back and say, I am not paying your bill. So I stiffed the CIA. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. I lived to tell the tale. Stiffed the CIA and lived to tell the tale.
So Medjugorje was just they claimed it was Marian apparitions, right? Is it supposed to have been like the closest thing in most recent modern history to something like Fatima?
It was based pretty much on Lourdes, yeah.
Okay.
But the kids didn't know. They didn't know anything. They said the most preposterous stuff when they were interviewed by Bishop Zanic, the first bishop to interview him. And he spoke their language, spoke Serbo-Croatian. He said, "This is ridiculous. I'm out of here." And at that point, all of these people who are holier than the Catholic Church, all these, there were ever a case of silly women obsessed with their sins, it was Medjugorje. And I'm telling you from personal experience, I'm on the plane out of Dubrovnik, and I got one lady on one side and one lady on the other side, and they're both going out of their way to tell me one's more outrageous sins than the other's outrageous sins. And they were coming to Medjugorje for some reason instead of just going to the confessional. And the lady next to me had eye damage because she looked into the sun. This is the type of hysteria that was going on at that time. And I think, I say it in the book, read the book. But basically, I think it was a reaction to feminism.
Oh, okay. So these apparitions were never approved by the church, right? Or were they?
No.
Okay.
They were condemned by both Bishop Zanic and his successor, Bishop Perish, and I interviewed both of these people.
Why do a lot of Catholics, it seems, especially like a lot of the more quote-unquote traditionals, ones in Schism, obviously we know the answer, but why do they hate Francis so much? I mean, just outwardly hate. And what's with this problem with the Jesuits I've been hearing? Oh, well, he's Jesuit, so I don't understand it.
Well, first of all, the Jesuits are a real problem. This is the category of reality. We're not making this up. They have serious problems. The homosexual cabal has taken over the Jesuits. It's that simple, especially if you're talking about American Jesuits. I know this.
Is Father James Martin a Jesuit?
Of course he is. Yes, okay. Of course he is. So if you ask him, he won't tell you whether he's a homosexual or not because he says the spiritual advisor told him not to. But he's certainly doing a lot to promote it. He's the foremost Catholic promoter of homosexuality in the world. And he can get an audience with Pope Francis anytime he wants. Well, that's scandalous.
What is the Catholic response to a Protestant saying, oh, well, if Catholicism is the truth, how can you have a Pope like Francis to basically appease and to normalize homosexuality, which I don't think he's ever done. He's never done that, so I always call that out. But when you have priests like Martin who are just blatantly doing it, I mean, what's the best way a Catholic could say, listen, I mean, this isn't a representation of the church, even though the guy is frocked, he's not defrocked, this Martin. So, I mean, I never know.
This is called clericalism.
Mm-hmm.
Father Martin always wears the Roman collar because he's always involved in the subversion of the church's teaching on sexuality. And so you can have, there were people, I think this was the problem in Ireland, if Father said it, it must be true. Well, I mean, I'm sure you should give the priest the benefit of the doubt, but that's not the way the Catholic Church works. And it doesn't work that way with the Pope either. The Pope is infallible under certain conditions when he talks about faith, solemn proclamations of faith and morals at cathedra. You can also go Lulis Joins, paragraph 25, about the ordinary magisterium and so on and so forth. But that does not cover the Pope shooting his mouth off on an airplane.
Right.
That is not the magisterium of the Catholic Church. It's the Pope shooting his mouth off on an airplane. And he's a human being and, okay. It is what it is. There was a joke. There was a joke going around Rome that the Swiss guards were now armed with tranquilizer guns, and their job was to shoot the Pope whenever he got on an airplane.
And just have him sleep the whole time. Did you see what happened at St. Patrick's Cathedral?
Yes.
That is a clear, and I mean, these people did admit to that. They wanted to subvert the church and make a mockery of it, because a lot of Catholics are really upset at the outset, which, I mean, I can't blame them to be. But I remember seeing that, and I remember saying, something's not right here. I don't think any bishop or the diocese would approve any such thing, but it's weird why they let it happen in the first place. I don't understand.
They were deceived. I just tweeted something where the documentation of the fact that the priest was deceived. The priest who allowed this was deceived. And that if the priest who was there actually was deceived, well, you can't hold Cardinal Dolan responsible for this, okay? But you got all of these self-appointed popes now jumping in immediately and condemning Cardinal Dolan without even looking into it. And sad to say, one of these guys is Strickland, Bishop Strickland, who is now bishop at large.
Right.
Ready at a moment's notice to condemn a fellow bishop. Bishop Strickland went to Medjugorje. The reason Bishop Strickland is not a bishop anymore is because he holds fellow bishops in contempt. This going to Medjugorje was an insult to Bishop Parrish or to the late Bishop Zonich, who suffered because they stood up for the truth against the Medjugorje industry. Okay? That's an insult to these fellow bishops. That's why he's not Bishop of Tyler, Texas anymore. He did the same thing to Gomez in Los Angeles, where he jumps off. That's his that Los Angeles is not in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. So Strickland jumps in, runs in unannounced without asking for any permission, and stands up there and condemns the Dodgers for having the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence there. And standing right at his side is Michael Voris, the prime bishop basher in the United States of America. Well, no wonder the bishops were annoyed at him. He's on someone else's territory. This is not the Catholic Church. You are a bishop of a particular place and you're responsible for that, and someone else is responsible for another place, and you have no business poaching on his territory. Same thing is true of New York now. Both the cardinal and the priest said, we were deceived. Well, okay. What did it take? Like 10 hours before they announced that they were deceived? Well, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt in the meantime and not jump on this bandwagon.
Right.
The John Henry Weston, I'm the Pope bandwagon, condemning bishops.
What in your mind could be one of the first steps we take to sort of put this, what's the right word? Hysteria, to the back seat and just sort of move this country forward as Catholics?
Read Logos Rising.
Okay.
This is the rational basis. It's a history of logos, which is a Greek word for reason. It's about the rationality of the Catholic faith. It's also a history of philosophy. This will cure you of your apparition mania. It will cure you of your Latin Mass mania. It will give you the fundamental metaphysical foundation for belief. I think that would be a salutary antidote to all of the hysteria that's going on right now.
Well, if you're ever in Nashville, I'd love for you to come with me to the Latin Novus Ordo Mass that we got. Here, let's end this on one last question. This is an interesting question. And it's another thoughts question, and I can't believe that so many people just... All right. Ask Dr. Jones. He says, what his thoughts on the state of the real estate market, and is usury involved?
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course. Usury is the fundamental problem with the American economy.
Mm-hmm.
I've written another book, a big book called Barren Metal, A History of Capitalism as the Conflict Between Labor and Usury. The labor is the source of all value. The Catholic Church has always promoted labor.
Yeah.
The model of the Benedictines who colonized Rome for the Catholic Church is ora et labora, work and pray and work. This has always been the Catholic teaching to this day. Labor is the source of all value. What is the option? Usury. There are only two options. And who is If labor is Catholic, usury is Jewish. And I got the title of my book from Shakespeare's great play, The Merchant of Venice, where Shylock says, my ducats can copulate faster than Laban's, and Laban's using rams. And at this point, Antonio says, if it's breed of barometal, keep it. I don't want to go into debt and be your slave. So yes, the reason you're paying an exorbitant amount for a new house is because of usury. This usury, you get in over your head and then you lose it all in the end. So stay away from usury. The main thing we have to defend here is, again, the Catholic Church, because there are people out there who are saying the church has changed its teaching on usury. It has not. The church has not changed its teaching. Pope Francis just last week condemned usury. So the church has not changed its teaching on usury at all. Does it? Not true.
How did it get that bad? Because I know before, 1930, there was no federal income tax. How did we get to the point where we are now, that in any facet of commerce there is going to be interest? Where did this happen? Where did it all go wrong? Did it happen after the Second World War and the economic boom of the 50s? Or can you point to any sort of historical starting point?
I sure can. Yeah. The Ciampi Rebellion in the 14th century in Florence. How's that? Is that good enough?
That's definitely good enough.
The rise of usury with the rise of the money economy in Europe, and Florence was a crucial place in this regard, because this is where in the Dark Ages, before the Middle Ages, you owed your lord labor. You owed him a day a week or 2 days a week or something like that. At a certain point, they wanted money, and at that point, you needed a money economy. And at that point, you had to go to the Jew, because he was the only one who would lend you money, and he charged you 43 1/3% interest a year, if you're lucky.
Yeah, if
you're lucky,
sounds familiar.
If you're lucky, and that goes there, and it got more and more complicated to the point where the final church state was 1742. Vix Prevenit, and the Pope Benedict XIV said, it's so complicated that I can't pronounce on every single type of transaction, because I'm out of my depth here. I'm not an economist. You need to go to the private forum. Now, some people have said the church has not changed its teaching. The church has said the economy is so complicated, you're going to have to talk to a specialist in the confessional. I can't give you a blanket statement.
Yep.
Now, if you're talking about the United States, in 1910, 90% of all manufacturing in the Midwest, largely in the Midwest, the United States, financed capital improvement out of profits. Okay, the Jews didn't like that.
Yeah, they weren't taking out any loans.
No, because you're not borrowing money to finance capital improvement. Well,
right.
If you don't borrow money, the Jew goes out of business. And so what happened is that they created the Federal Reserve System. After we had two banks before, Bank in the United States, two of them, they didn't want to call it that because they didn't want to call it a bank, but that's what it was. It's a private bank. And it has the benefits. Gets to have its cake and eat it too. It's a private bank that's run by as if like a government agency. And that's the beginning of more and more usury going throughout the economy. I remember a time when you couldn't have a student loan. There were no student loans. And if there are no student loans, they have to keep tuition low.
Right.
Well, guess what happened? You introduce the student loan and tuition goes through the roof in the same way that the real estate prices go through the roof as soon as you involve usury.
Yeah. Do you think it'll get better for, let's say, the Gen Zs or the new Gen Alphas, or do you think it'll continue to get worse for them as far as their financial?
They are forgiving debt. It looks as if they're forgiving debt, which they have to do. The government should basically forgive all student loans immediately, because the student loans were unfair because you could not default on a student loan.
Right.
So if you're Donald Trump, you can default, and the system is geared. That's the way you solve the usury problem. You allow liberal default laws. But they're only for rich people. And some poor schmuck who took out a student loan is going to pay for the rest of his life. He'll never get out of debt. That's not just. It should be abolished right now. All student loans should be forgiven.
I didn't want to end on that question. Do you have time? Are you okay on time, or when you need to?
Yeah, I have time. Let's wind it up, though.
Okay, we're going to wind it up. I made a video a couple weeks ago on the Catholic position for voting for Donald Trump. Do you think a Catholic can vote for Trump? Or, I mean, I know you think a Catholic can vote for Trump. Should a Catholic or ought a Catholic vote for Trump?
You can only answer this question when you're faced with the reality of who the opposing candidate is. Mm-hmm. Now, the first time around, the opposing candidate was Hillary Clinton. So the question at that point should be, can a Catholic in good conscience vote for Vlad the Impaler? The answer is, of course, because no one is as bad as Hillary Clinton. I can't think of anyone who would be worse than Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. You always have to make this choice. Okay? So if they were ever, like you bring back, I don't know, who? King Louis IX. Bring him back to life, and he's running against Donald Trump. Well, of course, vote for King Louis IX. Okay,
he has one of my favorite quotes of all time. The best way to converse with a blasphemer is to thrust your sword as far through his bowels as possible. I don't know if he was being literal.
The duty of a king, of a prince, is to wield the sword.
Right.
That's his duty. And if you're not willing to wield the sword, you should go to a monastery. Don't become king.
Well, listen, Dr. Jones, E. Michael Jones, thank you so much for joining the show. I really do appreciate your time. And I'd hope to have you on once again in the future. Maybe we could do a live stream and people can, comment and ask you questions. That would be great.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. You had a lot of intelligent questions. It was really a great meeting of the minds.
Well, I'd be happy to come on.
No, I mean it seriously, and I'd be happy to come on your show again.
Awesome. Stay in the room for 1 second after I click the end recording button. Thank you, Dr. Jones.